Yeah, it's Huck. And I'm out here at Pymatuning on this cold, blustery Saturday to check out some of the ice fishermen. There's some ice fishermen out there in the middle of the lake, but you got to be careful because there's a lot of areas that are really thin. I guess if you do this sort of thing, you kind of know exactly where you got to go and what you got to avoid. I myself had a rather traumatic experience with ice when I was about, I guess 10 or 11 years old, and I've had to force myself since then to kind of wander out on, well, a big lake like this full of ice. When I was a kid, I thought my brother had fallen through the ice. Him and another friend of his had taken my sled and gone out to this, well, it's about a 25-acre lake or really big pond. And we went out there to chase them down, me and my friend, because they had our sleds. They had left the sleds up on this hilltop overlooking the pond, and they were down there messing around on the water. Well, we grabbed the sleds while they weren't looking and started heading back home. I don't know, about 10 minutes later, as we were almost home, we thought about it and we thought, you know what, we really should tell them that we took the sleds back. So we headed back there, and when we got back to the pond, we noticed they weren't there. Well, we had saw footprints leading right up to what was a really big hole in the ice. It took about a minute or so for it to register, but inevitably it struck us that they had fallen in to the ice. And it took about another minute for sheer panic to set in. And so my friend Ricky and I ran just about as fast as we could run all the way back home. My dad and one of our neighbors were sitting there probably several hours into a kind of a drinking binge, and I had to tell him what I had saw. Well, we all hopped in my dad's car. My dad's friend Jim Baker was driving, and we drove back out to the pond, which was about a mile away. On the way there, he was driving so out of control and, well, so inebriated that Gigi, come here. Well, he ended up crashing into a big bank of snow because he didn't quite negotiate this hairpin turn. We got out there, and of course, Jim wandered out onto the ice and saw where the footprints were leading, and it sure looked as if these footprints led right up to the hole in the ice, right in the center of the lake. And, well, they ended up calling the police. The fire department came out, and within an hour, there were frogmen. They were chipping away at the ice. They had a rowboat out there, and they did this for hours and hours, well into the evening. Last thing I remember is them calling off the search because it was getting too dark and, frankly, I think too cold. I remember going back home, and as me and my dad walked into the house, I saw my mom, plenty of our neighbors, some of my relatives I hadn't seen for quite a while, all sitting around the living room and in the kitchen, many of them, like my mom, well, crying their eyes out. We were sure my brother and his friend, neighbor boy about his age, about 5 or 6 houses down the street, well, everybody had just about given up hope. Amazingly, my brother turned up along with his friend about a half hour later. It must have been about 8 o'clock at night, and they come wandering through the backyard here. What they had done was they had followed sled tracks all the way into the next county, weaving their way through woods and some old rural roads, thinking that somebody had stolen the sleds and they were afraid to come home without them. I remember that day like it was yesterday, and I've always been a little frightened of the ice ever since. And so I've had to force myself at times to face that fear and go ahead and walk out on ice. It's one of those things you just feel compelled to do when you're struck with such fear that you know it's irrational. I very much felt very similar to that this past month or two. I felt the very real realization that I was on the brink of not being able to keep our family home. And I have tried desperately to find a job so that somehow, some way, I could keep that. And I had kind of set a deadline of the day based on what little I had in the bank, that I would absolutely, positively have to find a job. And I'm glad to say that I did manage to successfully meet that deadline. But it came down to the very last day. And the job that I did secure, well, it's not going to pay me a whole lot, but it's a job. And I'm going to have to make a lot of sacrifices and learn to live a little bit differently than I did even when I was struggling, just me and my mom. But the good news is that if I'm very careful and I cut back a lot on some of the things I guess, well, I just don't really need, I should be able to hold on to the house. I want to thank one person in particular. I won't mention the name, because I know this person would probably not be too happy to be publicly acknowledged. But I want to thank that person very much. And even now, this person has been consistently helping me almost every week with little financial assistance. And I just can't explain how moved I am and how grateful I am that whatever it is I may have ever said or ever done to open this person's heart to me and my situation, well, I can't even begin to fathom what that might have been, but I am very grateful. So I came out here on this cold and frigid day to let you know that once again I have kind of stared one of my worst fears in the face, and somehow I'm still here. And I don't know, they say what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. So I should be good for a while, huh? Anyway, I'm Huck. Thanks a lot for watching.